Hey, it's 12 noon Eastern Time, which means it's time for this week's episode of Ask the Instructor. I'm John Kursma. The show is brought to you by the Tampa School of Real Estate. Every Wednesday, 12 noon Eastern Time, we're here live helping you understand the technical side of the real estate industry. And what we're going to be talking about today is doing math backwards. Now you might ask, why do you want to do the math backwards? And once you understand the power of being able to do this backwards, there actually is a lot of instances in the real world where you'll want to know how to do this backwards. But on top of that, your exam could ask you maybe a question that seems like one you already know, except for it seems backwards. So that's what we're talking about today, how to solve the math backwards. I'm John Kursmo. The show's brought to you by the Tampa School of Real Estate. You're watching Ask the Instructor.
You are watching Ask the Instructor. Absorb the knowledge. Become the expert.
Hey, welcome back to this week's episode of Ask the Instructor. I'm John Kursman. The show is brought to you by the Tampa School of Real Estate, where every Wednesday we are live, helping you understand the technical side of the real estate industry. And what we're talking about today is doing math backwards. Now, just to give you some context in this here, so in case whether you're just learning this to learn it or whether you're learning it because you want to know it for your real estate exam, let's just go over some of the context of why you would want to do the math backwards. So first, real world example of this. One of the most important times that you'll want to essentially know how to do this math backwards is calculating the seller's net. And that's where a seller gives you a certain net amount that they want to net this amount when they walk away from the property. But now we need to figure out what price we need to sell it for to factor in the closing cost, our commission, and all these other things. We're going to work on a simple example of something like that later today. On your exam, you can also see something along the lines as you might remember how to calculate documentary stamp taxes on the deed. But let's say your documentary stamp tax on the deed is this much money, how much did the house cost? So again, that's another one where you're having to solve this math backwards. So to start off, let's just take it really simple. Let's take it really simple so you can understand these simple concepts here, and this is going to help it make a lot more sense when we get into the more complex type of questions. So say I asked you, what is 10 times 20? So 10 times 20, put that in your calculator, you'll end up with 200. We all in agreement there? Okay, cool. 10 times 20 is 200. Yeah, you're probably like, of course, John, I know how to use my calculator. I don't even need a calculator for that one. Great. You're off to a great start. Because if you could do this, you probably already know that if I were to ask you what times 20 equals 200. Now, being that we just solved that one going forward, we know the answer is 10. We know that 10 times 20 is 200. But rather than just going through simple trial and error of trying to figure out what this, we'll call it x is here. You know, you might not like algebra, but when we're trying to find that x, when we're trying to find out what times 20 equals 200, what type of math calculation we could do to figure out exactly what that number is very easily. Now, when we were solving this going forward here, we just did this times this, and we found the answer. So we were searching for the answer in this first question, whereas this one, we're really looking for the question. So once you understand the trick here, it's actually going to be really simple to apply this in even the more complex questions. But what you've got to do, we're reversing the direction here. We're going in reverse of how we would normally solve this question. Normally, we're going forward motion, like we just did up here. We went forward, this times this equals this. But now, this is equal to something times 20. So how do we find that something, that x there? So again, we're working backwards. And what you've got to do is flip it and reverse it. You've got to learn how to flip it and reverse it. We'd play the song for you here, but I'm sure it would get taken down due to copyright claims. So just imagine it. Go put on that song if you want at home to flip it and reverse it. Now, we've already reversed it. We've already figured out we're working in reverse here, so we've got that accomplished, but now we've got to flip it. And what flip it means is instead of multiplication, we're going to do division. The opposite of multiplication is division, because what we could do is 200 divided by, so instead of multiplying, we're now dividing 200 divided by 20, and that's how we're going to get to that 10. So the point here, and this is why I wanted to use as simple of math as we could come up with here, just really basic numbers, because this is the principle. This is the concept you need to know. You need to know how to flip it and reverse it to be able to solve this math backwards. So again, normally 10 times 20 is 200. Cool, great, we got that. Everyone knows how to do that. But then we could just do trial and error. 5 times 20, no, that's only 100. Okay, 6 times 20, no. 20 times 20, no, that's 400. And you just do trial and error to figure out eventually until you get to 10. But especially when you're not working with a whole number with this, maybe if it was 10.5 or 10.57, it's a lot of trial and error to find that number. And that's why it's so important to know this practice of flipping it and reversing it. I wrote a song about it. It's so important. It's how important of a math concept it is. When you want to work it in reverse, you got to flip the sign. So 200 divided by 20 gives us 10. And that's how we solve these questions backwards, or this math backwards. Now, as we get into these more detailed types of problems, the ones you could potentially see on your exam, this is where you're going to have to remember the same concept here, and remember that we're going to flip it and reverse it. But first, we're going to take, before any more flipping it and reversing it, we're going to take a quick commercial break, so stick with us. I'm John Chrismo. You're watching Ask the Instructor.
The most powerful tool to study for your real estate exam is the Question Simulator from Tampa School of Real Estate. We've used our years of experience in preparing students for the Florida real estate exam to bring you the most powerful exam study tool available. In the Question Simulator, you'll be able to go directly to a particular unit so you can focus on the sections where you need the most practice. We have also included the percentages of each unit so you know which units are the most important for your real estate exam. Every question will immediately give you detailed feedback, which is almost always more important than the question or the answer themselves. After completing all the questions in a particular unit, you can go through question by question and review any that you've gotten wrong. You could also print out a report at the end of each quiz. The Question Simulator from Tampa School of Real Estate is 100% mobile compatible, so you can practice with test questions anywhere you have your phone with you. Enroll now at questionsimulator.com and get ready to pass your exam.
Hey, welcome back to this week's episode of Ask the Instructor. I'm John Chrismo. This show is brought to you by the Tampa School of Real Estate. And what we're talking about today is solving real estate math backwards. Now, before we went on break here, we covered the simple concept of how to flip it and reverse it, because this is the basis of how you solve this math backwards. Now, I want to jump into a relatively easy question. We'll build up into some of these more in-depth ones. Because once you start to understand how easy it is to flip it and reverse it, once you know what to do, you'll realize it's not really that difficult to solve these questions. So we're going to do the normal order of solving this in blue. So this question that I want to dive into first is doc stamps on deed. So what is the doc stamps on the deed if the price was, we'll say, we'll do $125,000. So we've got a $125,000 purchase price. And really, that's all we need to find the doc stamps on the deed. That's all the information the question has to give us is, what are the doc stamps on the deed on a property that's priced at $125,000? So hopefully you remember here that you're first going to divide by 100. And what that gives you is the number of stamps, which remember should always be a whole number, which in this case here it is. So we've got 1,250 stamps that we need. Now all we're going to do is just take that and multiply it by the tax for each stamp, the cost of the stamp. So we're going to do 1,250 times 0.7, and we get 875 when we multiply by 0.7. So what we just did there, to walk through this again, because this is how you find doc stamps on a deed. You start with the purchase price, you divide it by 100, that gives you the number of stamps, and the stamps cost 70 cents each. So we multiply that by 70 cents, and then we get $8.75 as our total tax. But now, how do we do this one backwards? What if the question were to ask you that what is the price if your tax is $875? Again, you can use the trial and error. That is one of the benefits of this being a multiple choice exam, is that if you just try out those 4 answer choices there, going through it and figuring out, okay, this price, no, that's not it. This price, no, that's not it. This price, okay, there we go. There's our answer. The most you'll have to do that is 4 times and you'll find the answer. So that's one way to go about it. But a quicker, less stressful, less frustrating, less work way of doing that is this whole flip it and reverse it concept again. So remember that we got to go in reverse. This is where we are, and we want to go get to this price. So how do we find the $125,000 when it tells us the tax is $875? So normally, again, our formula for this was our price divided by 100 times 70 cents equals our tax. So again, we're going to work this in reverse. We've got the tax. We want to find the price. So we're going right to left here, $875. Now, normally we multiply by 70 cents to get to that $875. What we're going to do here instead is we're going to flip this. So this multiplication is now going to be division. So we're doing $875 divided by 0.70. And if you put that in your calculator, 875 divided by 0.70, you're going to end up back at 1250, because that's what we did here. We're just working this in reverse. Instead of multiplying, though, we're going to divide. That's how you reverse engineer these formulas here. So 875 divided by 70 cents is going to give us the 1250. And then instead of divide, we've got to multiply. Remember, we're doing the opposite. That's the flip it portion of this. So times 100, so 1250 times 100 is going to give us $125,000. Now, when you first start trying to practice this working this in reverse, make sure you know how to solve these questions going forward, going normal direction first. Because if you don't understand this, you're definitely not going to understand this, because you have to understand this to understand how to do it in reverse. So make sure you've got a firm grasp on how to calculate the doc stamps on the deed normally before you find the price from the documentary stamp taxes on the deed. And again, this can be a way they ask about this on the question. What would be the approximate price on a property where the stamp tax on the deed was $875? And you might want to just go through and just do the calculations of, okay, let's take a price, divide that by 100, and multiply by 70 cents, because I know that's how you find it. And then you just keep working through the different answer choices there until you find which one matches up with the $875 in the question. Because if you picked, let's say, $100,000, you'd end up with less than $875. If you picked $150,000, you'd end up with more than $875. So that's one way to go about it, but once you kind of understand what you're doing going forward, you absolutely can work this backwards, because you're just going to go in reverse order, and instead of multiply, you're going to divide, and vice versa. So again, that $875, we divide it by 70 cents, we multiply it by 100, and that gives us our purchase price of $125,000. So that's how to work doc stamps on the deed backwards. But I still want to talk about the seller's net. That's definitely an important one. We're going to talk a little bit about profit. We're actually going to do that one next. But first, we're going to take a quick commercial break. Stick with us. I'm John Crismo. You're watching Ask the Instructor. Have you completed your post-licensing education yet? Look, I know you're probably thinking, hey, it's not my renewal deadline. I don't need to do post-licensing yet. But look, here's why you want to do post-licensing as soon as you've got your real estate license, as soon as you're able to take post-licensing. It's not just another course about arbitrary laws that you're never going to use again. It's about real-world, usable topics that'll help you grow your real estate business, to help you take it to the next level. Look, let me ask you this one question. If this course helps you close just one deal, if you get one extra deal from post-licensing, is it worth the investment? I'd say it is. We get paid pretty well, so one deal means a lot of money. Check out postflorida.com. That's postflorida.com for the full details about post-licensing. Hey, welcome back to this week's episode of Ask the Instructor. I'm John Carissimo. The show is brought to you by the Tampa School of Real Estate, and what we're talking about today is how to solve math backwards. Now, we just covered the doc stamps on the deed. The first segment here, we talked about the theory of how to solve this backwards. Then we talked about how to do doc stamps on the deed. But what I want to talk about next is profit. So how to calculate profit backwards. So we're first going to go ahead and solve a question with profit going forward. And also it's the same with loss on this one. Actually, let's start with loss. Loss is a little bit easier to wrap your head around. Then we'll go through the profit one. So let's first calculate a loss problem here. So percentage of loss. So if we're trying to find loss, we need two things. We need our profit or loss divided by cost. Profit or loss divided by cost. That's your formula for figuring out what is your percentage of loss. So let's say we've got a question here where we made a we'll say a $25,000 profit, and our cost was $100,000, meaning that we bought a property for $100,000 and we sold it for $125,000, or maybe a little bit higher than that once we factor in expenses, but ultimately we profited $25,000. So profit or loss divided by cost, and this is the same for profit and loss here. So if we had made this $25,000 in profit, that's a 25% profit or a 25% loss, because it's the amount of profit or loss in comparison to our initial investment, which is our cost. And the only difference here is whether this is a plus 25, whether we went up 25% of our money or we lost 25% of our money. Now, if I were to ask you, if we had a cost of $100,000 and we had a loss of $25,000, what was our price that we had sold it for? So if we bought it for $100,000, we lost $25,000. What was the price that we sold it for? We bought it for $100,000. If we lost $25,000, we would have sold it for $75,000. And that's if this was a loss. Now, if this were a profit, if we had a 25% profit, then what would be our price? Well, if our cost, our initial investment where we started from, was $100,000 and we just now profited $25,000, that'd be $125,000 price. So $100,000 is where we started from. If we lost the $25,000, that's $75,000. If we made the $25,000, that's $125,000. Sure, you're probably following now. If not, talk to me in the comments. Let me know. But now let's make this a little bit more in depth here. So that's basically going forward with this here when you have all this information. But now let's say this. What was your price when you had a cost? Actually, let's say when we had what was the cost? Let's find the cost here because we just went through the price. What is the cost when you had a 25% loss and our price that we had sold it for. And this is where you want to make sure you know these terms here. Cost is your initial investment. Price is what you sell it for. When we had sold it for $75,000. So we sold it for $75,000. That's after, though, we took a $25,000 loss. These are in order of what happens. Number one, we invest in it. That's with our cost. Number two, we get our 25% loss when we had sold it. So our price that we had sold it for was ultimately $75,000. Now you're going to notice here that these are the same exact numbers I was just using. And that's, again, because you want to know this forward to be able to understand this backwards. If you don't understand it going forward, you're not going to be able to understand it going backwards here. So make sure you've got it down going forward first. So going off of this one here, this is the price that we were just talking about here, that we had sold it for $75,000. But it's not, our 25% loss isn't 25% of what we sold it for, it's 25% of our initial investment. Now, being that we just went through that, the number here is going to be $100,000. But now the question is, how do we find that $100,000? Well, again, the going forward way, you could do $100,000 times 25% is $25,000, subtract that out, and yes, that ends up being $75,000. And again, you could use that trial and error. That way works. That's going forward. But now the simpler, quicker way to work this backwards when you could wrap your brain around it is understanding the percentages of these here. So our cost was our initial 100% investment. That was our initial money. We had 100% of our money to begin with. We invested 100% of our money, and then we lost 25% of our money. So then, what is that $75,000 in terms of a percentage? It's 75% of our initial investment. And normally we would do cost times 75% to get $75,000. But again, flipping it and reversing it, we could do the $75,000 divided by 75%. And when we do 75,000 divided by 75%, you'll end up with the $100,000. So what you've got to do here is think of it in terms of percentages here. Now, if this were a profit, if we flip the script on this a little bit and make this a $25,000 profit. So this is why it's important to understand what's going on here, not just know how to work with the numbers, but what these numbers mean, because we could have the same question of number one, our cost. We don't know. We're trying to find the cost. What is the cost if we now have a 25% profit and our price that we had sold it for? Now, if you remember in that last example, our price was $125,000 on this property. So what is our cost? What was our initial investment when we made a 25% profit and we sold the property for $125,000? So now finding this, it's the same type of numbers. Again, our initial investment is 100%. But now the difference here, up here we lost 25%. Here, we're not losing 25%, we're gaining 25%. So when we take our initial investment and we add on a 25% profit, that means the $125,000 is 125% of our initial investment. So this $125,000 is 125% of our initial investment. And again, you could do the cost. If we had that number, it's $100,000. Again, just to go back to doing this forward, our initial cost was $100,000. When we tack on 25% to that, it's going to be 125%. So 100,000 times 125%, you're going to get 125,000. Or again, to solve this backwards, we're going to take this 125,000, divide it by 125%, and you'll find out again that that cost is $100,000. So that's how to do profit backwards for figuring out percentage of profits. And this can have some real world applications as well. You might say, well, what do you mean I wouldn't know my cost? Why wouldn't you know your cost if you already bought the property? Because maybe you didn't buy the property, and you're just trying to forecast some numbers. You're trying to run some numbers, to do some predictions, to do some analysis, to run out some scenarios to see what could potentially happen. That's where this is going to be applicable in the real world. Now, I've got one more piece of math to share with you, and this is, again, based on the same concept of working this backwards, and it's finding the seller's net, or really finding the price when the seller wants a certain amount of net, which this is extremely important in the real world. So stick with us. I'm John Chrismo. You're watching Ask the Instructor. Are you studying for your Florida real estate exam? If you are, you need to check out our Pass First Try strategy. You're going to love this. It's 4 steps that we break down the process to study for your Florida real estate exam. So you're set up to pass your Florida real estate exam, because that's what you're studying for, right? To pass your exam. It's 4 steps. Number 1, you learn the information. You've got to learn this to be able to pass the exam, but it doesn't stop at learning. Step 2, you've got to reinforce the basic, simple, key concepts. As you learn this information, keep reviewing the simple things. You don't need to know everything, but you got to review these basic key concepts. Step 3, you've got to test your knowledge. The exam's going to test your knowledge, so if you don't test your knowledge in advance, you won't find out if you know what you think you know until you take the exam. And then step 4 is be confident and prepared, because even if you know this material, you need to be confident that you know the material. Check out the full strategy at passfirsttry.com. That's passfirsttry.com. Hey, welcome back to this week's episode of Ask the Instructor. I'm John Chrismo. This show is brought to you by the Tampa School of Real Estate, where every Wednesday, 12 noon Eastern Time, we're here live helping you understand the technical side of the real estate industry. And what we're talking about today is how to do real estate math backwards. We covered the basic theory first. Then we talked about doing doc stamps backwards. Then we just covered doing profit backwards, but probably one of the most applicable in the real world, especially when you're working in residential real estate, is understanding seller's net. That's probably one of the pieces of math that you learn in your pre-licensing course that ultimately is something that you're going to see again, and you'll really have some computation that you've got to do on your part. Now, even if you're working with these calculators you get from title companies and things like that, it's important to understand how these numbers all work out. So let's just go through a very basic, in the real world it's going to be much more complicated than this, but just a basic, maybe exam version of seller's net. So ultimately, to find the net, which the net is how much the seller is able to walk away with after all of their expenses. So let's say that the seller sells their property for $200,000. So they sell it for $200,000. Let's say that they pay a 6% commission on this property. A 6% commission, overall total commission of 6%. So that's going to be $12,000 for a 6% commission. And that's a cost. They don't get to keep all that $200,000. They've got our commission of $12,000. They might also have some closing cost of, let's say, $5,000. Again, just to make a example number. Real closing costs in the real world will vary. And let's just keep the mortgage out of it as well, because normally in the real world, most people are going to have a mortgage, and you would also subtract that. But I just want to keep the numbers as this example as simple and basic as possible. Then we can work on complicating it. So what we're going to do here now is find the net. If these were our only expenses of the sale, the commission and the closing costs, again, this would assume that they own this property free and clear. They don't have any mortgage on it. So the net here would be $200,000 minus $12,000. That would bring us down to $188,000. Minus another $5,000 would bring us down to $183,000. So that's how we find the seller's net, what they're able to walk away with from the property. And this is a really important calculation to know, because ultimately this is what a seller is most concerned with. Not necessarily how much they're going to have to pay you. They might not even be thinking about closing costs. They want to think about how much money they're able to walk away with. And they know that even though they sell it for $200,000, they'll have some costs, but if they don't understand what those costs are, and the only cost you're bringing up is your commission, then obviously they're going to negotiate you on the commission because they're like, well, I'm going to have all kinds of other expenses too. Let's cut this down as much as possible. So understanding this calculation is a powerful negotiation strategy because this will help them get a better idea of an estimate of how much it is they could walk away with this given scenarios. And a lot of title companies have really great calculators you could use. If they don't have a fancy calculator, chances are they've got good customer service, or they should at least. Otherwise, I don't know how they're still in business. So you could call them up and they could prepare some of these statements for you, just some basic estimations of the seller's net. But absolutely have a tool like that in the real world that'll help give them a somewhat accurate estimation of the expenses if they sell at this date, this time, this place, and so on and so forth. But now the question is, for solving this backwards, if the seller wants to net $183,000, the seller wants to net $183,000, what must they sell the property for to pay you a 6% commission and to pay you $5,000 in closing cost? So when we're solving this now, this question is asking, well, what does the price need to be with a 6% commission? Now, how do we know that the 6% commission isn't going to be $12,000 or $10,000 or $15,000? Because this 6% commission, and this is the mistake a lot of people would make, is they'll base the 6% commission off of the net, not off of the price. But let me ask you this. What do you want to be paid your 6% commission on? Do you want it paid on the price, which is ultimately going to be the biggest number? Or do you want to be paid off of what the seller's going to walk away with? And this is assuming they own this free and clear. If they've got a $180,000 mortgage, then you're getting 6% to $3,000 there, which you probably don't want that. You probably want the 6% off of the actual price. And that's typically how this always is calculated in the real world. Your commission is charged on the price. It's not charged off of the net. So in order for us to find out what is this price, what is the price when we charge a 6% commission and it's estimated to be $5,000 in closing cost and they want a net of $183,000. So again, we're going to solve this backwards. We're working backwards here. So we know we've got to account for the $183,000 and the $5,000 in closing cost. We've got to at least get that. And so that puts us at this $188,000 mark here. $183,000 plus $5,000 in closing cost gives us $188,000. Now again, our commission is based on the sale price, which is ultimately going to be higher than this net amount, or this net plus the closing costs here. We need to get $188,000 after our commission, and our commission is going to be based off of the price that we sell the property for. So continuing to work this backwards, and this is why I wanted to just do that profit example before this, again, you've got to think in terms of percentages, because we don't have a dollar amount here for the commission, and we're not going to know what the dollar amount of the commission is until we have the sale price figured out. Once we have the sale price figured out, then we could figure out that the commission is going to be $12,000, but we don't know that yet. We don't know that yet because we don't know what price we need to sell it for to get a 6% commission and get that $188,000. So we'd have $5,000 for closing cost and $183,000 in net. So what we've got to do again is think of this in percentages. So our commission is 6%. And our total price is going to be 100%. Imagine this as a pie chart. We've got a little pie chart here. There's our commission that makes up 6%. The whole thing is 100, so how much is left over, which is what this $188,000 is? That's 94%. 6% of that 100% of that total purchase price is going to be commission. The remaining 94%, if we just do that same math here, 100 minus 6% is 94%. So 94% of the sale price is going to be $188,000. And now, just like we did, this is laid out backwards here, but we're going to take $188,000, divide it by 94%, and you're going to find out. And look, we'll even test this theory just because I know we're working with funkier numbers here, but we're just going to put this in our calculator. 188,000 divided by 0.94, 94%. We get $200,000. So our sale price needs to be $200,000. Now, what if we did do 6% of the $188,000? Now, if you remember here, 6% of $200,000 times 6% is $12,000. So $12,000 for a commission, or if we had did it like maybe you might make that mistake the first time going through this of doing 6% off the $188,000 times 6%, you'd only be factoring in for $11,280 in commission, which you probably wouldn't take that hit on your commission, but then the seller's going to take their hit on their net. They're not going to walk away with $183,000 because you're going to be shorting them, because the 6% is based off of the price. It's not based off of any other number. It's based off the price. So again, you got to think of this in terms of percentages. If the commission is 6%, that means all the other expenses are going to be 94%, and if all the other expenses add up to $188,000, we just divide that by 94%, and you're going to get the $200,000. So that's a really important calculation to understand in the real world, because this will help you figuring out the feasibility for pricing a property of what the seller is able to walk away with. And if the seller needs this certain amount, especially when you're trying to work with both sides of the sale, of selling their property and getting them in the next property, you got to understand how much it is they're going to be walking away with to see how much of the other property is going to be a possibility. So that's how you do that backwards. And these are some of the most common types of questions they might ask about backwards on your Florida real estate exam. So we covered doc stamps, we covered percentage of profit, we covered these seller's net, but it could be with really any of the math. Any of the math can be done backwards as well, where you have this much of this in school board property taxes, and this was the millage rate, and again now it's just solving that one little part of this backwards. So it's really all the same though, of just understanding that concept of flip it and reverse it. So look, that's all the time we've got for today. Thank you guys for tuning in. If you've enjoyed today, make sure you share this with your friends. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of these free live little podcast, webinar, show, whatever it is that you want to call it, because we've got a lot of great topics in here. You can find a whole bunch more at tampaschool.com/success. Look, that's about all the time we've got for today, so thank you guys again for tuning in. If you've got to get your real estate license, give us a call. We can help you out with that. If you've got to do post-licensing, give us a call. We can help you out with that. Continue education, give us a call. We can help you out with that. You want to get your broker license, give us a call. We can help you out with that. Anything it is that you need, real estate education or otherwise, give us a call. Our phone number is 813-333-2676. Again, 813-333-2676. That's all we got for today. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I'll see you Friday for State of Real Estate. Hey, so if you're thinking about starting a real estate career, it could feel a little overwhelming sometimes. Look, that's completely understandable. That's why we're here to help. If you haven't already, check out our Success Center, tampaschool.com/success, or if you don't even know where to begin, give us a call. We'd love to help you out. We've got advisors standing by to answer any questions you have and assist you in any way it is that we can. Our phone number is 813-928-0106. Again, that's 813-928-0106. Give us a call. We're the Tampa School of Real Estate.
Do you want a career that allows you to be in control? With a career in real estate, you'll get to call the shots. Whether you're looking at starting part-time or want to become the next top agent, a career in real estate makes it possible. Find out what it takes at tampaschool.com. Do you want to incorporate studying for your real estate exams into your busy schedule? Now you can review the key topics you need to know to pass your class and state exams with our MP3 audio review. Simply pop in your headphones or connect to your car to reinforce crucial information while you exercise or drive. Listen to the first unit for free at mp3audioreview.com. That's mp3audioreview.com.
Are you thinking about a career in real estate? Hey, I'm John Chrisma with the Tampa School of Real Estate, and we've helped thousands of people just like you obtain their real estate license. If you're thinking about a career in real estate, give us a call. The phone number is 813-928-0106. Our advisors are standing by to answer any questions you have and assist you in any way they can. Hey, if you're enjoying the show today, which I'm sure you are, be sure to hit like, subscribe, post your comments, share with your friends and family. Thank you guys so much for watching.